Okay, so I'm going to do the famous show of hands. Who here gets involved in sales calls in one vein or another? Thank God for that. Right, so I'm going to be talking about discovery calls here today, something that's quite actionable for, I think, anybody in this room. Here at Refract, we've got the benefit of listening and analysing tens of thousands of these things, so hopefully I've got some good insights today. So let's talk about discovery and why I think it's important. In my opinion, discovery is the single most important stage of a sales process. It's where deals are won and lost. And actually, when I look at the most elite salespeople, they're the ones who can do discovery really well. So I thought what I'd do is define what I believe to be discovery in the sales process. So the definition that I've got is the stage in the sales process where a salesperson can learn and identify how they can best add value for a prospect in order to warrant a further investment of time. So let me just break that down a little bit. First of all, the stage in the sales process. All too often, I see salespeople try and mash discovery into other parts of their sales cycle, commonly the demo. What happens is discovery gets diluted, demo gets diluted, and essentially the discovery conversation becomes ineffective. Discovery should, in my opinion, be treated as a completely isolated stage of the sales process, full stop. Secondly, where a salesperson can learn and identify. How do we learn and identify? We do that by asking great questions. Great questions being the pinnacle of effective discovery conversations. In order to warrant a further investment of time, taking someone to a discovery call does not mean that they should become someone who we should demo to. Good discovery should be as much about qualifying prospects out of our funnel as well as qualifying them in. As one of our customers at Refract, Corey Bray in America, once famously said, "My very best closing technique is discovery." So here's some tips and tricks from me on having more effective discovery conversation. First of all, stop believing these old wives' tales that we should never ever ask these awful closed questions. That's just completely wrong. We should lead with closed questions and follow it with open questions. When we ask closed questions, it often allows our prospects to select the option that we want them to select rather than giving us the answer that we don't want them to give. Here's a great example. Mr. VP of Sales, when I speak with other VPs of sales and scaling SaaS companies, they tell me commonly they've got one of the following two challenges. Number one, they're frustrated at how long it takes to get new hires up to be becoming top performers. Number two, they're frustrated that so much of their business is being closed by so few people on their sales team. Which one of those are you bumping into the most? So there's my closed question. What happens is the prospect then selects option A or option B. Brilliant. What I then say is follow up with the open question. Okay, you said option B. Can you tell me more about that? They then elaborate on the pain that they've selected. I've had to ask hardly any insightful questions there, but my closed question has led me to the place I want to be. Point number two, the question, can you tell me more about that? Salespeople come to me all the time and think of that they're stressing and trying to think of the perfect, intelligent discovery question to ask on their discovery calls, when actually the purpose of discovery is just to get our prospects to talk more. So how do we get our prospects to talk more? We just simply ask them to talk more. Can you tell me more about that? Often what happens when we ask that question is prospects will happily elaborate naturally on the pain that they've informed you of, and we'll get much more insightful answers than asking these clever questions. And the best detectives on TV shows are excellent asking this question. Tell me more about that. What do you mean by that? They get the answers they're looking for. Tip number three, active listening. This is one of the hardest skills for any salesperson to master. When I say active listening, I mean intrinsically listening to the specific words, the nuggets that our prospects are saying and how they're saying it. Most salespeople will hear an emotive word used by a prospect, smile that they've got a great answer, and move on to the next question. When you actively listen to what your prospects are saying, you're listening for the nuggets where they're saying things like, yeah, that can be challenging, or yeah, it's quite frustrating, or that sounds interesting. The best thing to do is to grab onto those little emotive words and actually ask more. Hang on, you said that sounds interesting. What is it about that that's interesting to you? When you ask those questions, prospects will naturally reveal more. So actively listen for those nuggets and you'll have more effective conversations. Number four, the power of the pause. Is often quite useful for improving active listening skills. I tell my salespeople Refract to count to 2 or 3 in their head after a prospect's finished talking. Now, most salespeople hate silence. They will fill silence with words, and so they don't like doing it. But what happens when we stay silent after our prospects finish talking is the prospect goes again. The prospect doesn't like silence. They will fill the silence with more words. They'll give you more information than you were initially looking for. So get comfortable with long pauses. And often I've found that when you just sit in silence after a prospect's given you quite an uncomfortable answer, they stew on it more. It builds up that kind of intensity, and that's where we find pain builds. Finally, number 5. The choice of words and language we use. And I'll break this into 2 parts. First of all, the words that we shouldn't use. Filler terms. Everyone has filler terms. Everyone knows what their filler terms are. They're basically useless words that we use to fill in conversations. But the wrong filler word at the wrong time can make or break a sales call. Yeah, just imagine some examples here. If a doctor gave you some pills and said, I think you'll be okay, the word think, shit. If you're on a plane and the pilot says, we should be landing safely in the next half an hour, the word should just kills that. And thirdly, if you've got Theresa May saying, when we leave the European Union, hopefully we'll be okay, that word hopefully, useless, but suddenly changes the dynamic. So, what words can we use to have more positive conversations? I've chosen 3 that I'm happy for you to all take for yourself that I use quite often. The word imagine. Imagine, such a powerful word for storytelling. It often makes the prospect think of the future heaven that you're going to give them and puts themselves in that position. So, I'll say something like, Mr. Prospect, imagine if I was a prospect, imagine if I was one of a new salesperson coming to your team and I had access to this solution. How do you think I would feel? Imagine such a key player on people's emotions and makes them think of that happier place. The word relevant, this is a great one. Instead of using the phrase, does that make sense? Which I hate that question. Salespeople ask, does that make sense all the time? And what happens? They get the answer, yes, from the prospect. Useless. Instead of asking, does that make sense? Ask, how relevant is that? Simply just turning that question by you asking how relevant will get your prospects elaborating more, will get you more synergy in the conversations. And finally, a word that I probably use too much is the word fair. Why do I think this is so effective? People don't like being unfair. Prospects' natural inhibition is to find a fair outcome. So think about how you can incorporate this in the proposals that you make. Example, Mr. Prospect, if we agree to this price, would it be fair if we had this signed off today? Or, Mr. Prospect, would it be fair to get your boss involved in the demo if we found there was a good fit on this call today? Prospects will always naturally agree to saying yes. They don't like being unfair. They will choose the fair option. You'll get more outcomes that you desire. Finally, we have some really good resources, such as like checklists for discovery calls, also some really interesting data on effective discovery conversations that we've collated over time. So if anybody wants access to those, just give me a shout. My email address is on the flyers on your chairs, and we'll send that out. Thank you.